This is great, thank you. So I'm Janet Cowell, and I'm the State Treasurer for North Carolina, and I am here with Dr. Robert Clark from NC State, and we have worked on a number of collaborations over the years. He's been very helpful to me, so happy to do that. I'm also a graduate of Wharton, so I'm also happy to be back on campus, and Olivia Mitchell and the Pension Retirement Council. First slide. Okay, this is, my house almost looks like this. This is not my house, but I use this picture to illustrate that many of the defined benefit plans in the country were established back in the 40s and 50s. They are old chestnuts, many of them. In North Carolina's case, we are 96% funded, $90 billion plan. So one of the largest and best funded in the country. But it's amazing to me, I've been treasurer now for 7 years, that there's not a whole lot of discussion or even movement on some of the reforms of these systems that are as solid as these mid-century homes. And the reasons for that are multifold. I think resource issues. You spend so much time fighting through just trying to get basic resources. We're probably one of the most under-resourced plans in the country. Ideological battles, people who really want to just blow these plans up. They don't think that they're right for the state. They're worried about the liabilities. Some of them are very valid issues, but others purely more just national playbooks that they try to bring back to North Carolina. And so instead of reforming, which here's a nice ranch that's been renovated, they don't get to those topics. Annuity options are one of the topics that really don't get discussed very much. I was surprised when we started working on this paper that I had, and maybe this should be embarrassing, but had really not had any explicit conversations about our stats on this, nor had I ever in the Association of State Treasurers ever seen any data on this. So that just gives you a sense of how little some of these very important topics get discussed. This data is from a Wisconsin Legislative Council, where they surveyed 85 different state-managed retirement plans and looked at what options they had. You can see that everyone had the maximum allowance, joint and survivor, and then there were a few other options offered, but it is not, you don't have massive amounts of choice. And we thought, given the changes that we've been talking about all day, that maybe there should be other options for people to accommodate the changing needs and lifestyles. This gives you a more detailed breakdown of what some of the plans are offering and who is making these choices. And I think you see from this that the maximum allowance joint survivor tend to be the most predominant two selected, with a few exceptions like in Nebraska and Iowa, which we've highlighted. And we don't know why people are choosing these things, how things are framed, or any additional data digging underneath. But you do see that there are people choosing some where there are options offered. Things like Social Security leveling in North Carolina, that's our teachers program, as well as guaranteed payment in Nebraska and Washington State's partial lump sum. And I will say on the partial lump sum in the public plans, these tend to be 10, 20, or 30% outpayments, not the entire amount. So I am going to turn it over to Bob, we're tag teaming on this, to explain the two new options that we thought were going to be worth exploring, and he will explain those to you. I will flip it to your next slide.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to back up one. How do I back up?
You just
Is there a
hit
backup?
left.
Left, up there. So just quickly to sort of continue Janet's presentation about what we were looking at. So we went to the websites of all of these plans, and these are state plans managed for either general state employees or teachers or together. And so a couple of them down at the end, the Social Security leveling we're going to talk a little bit more about later, but it's an interesting one that until you start looking at public plans you may not have thought about. And this is from a survey that Janet sent out to her colleagues, other state treasurers. And interestingly enough, for you who have not looked at public plans, the big difference is the relatively low proportion of people choosing joint survivorship. These plans are not covered by ERISA. In general, they're not requiring people to look at joint and survivorship. They're there. And most plans, if you go back and look, have a number of options, 4, 5, or 6. The joint survivorships come in a lot of different phases, whether it's 75%, 60, or 50%. But the real interesting thing about this is the low proportion choosing joint survivorship. And we have some micro data from North Carolina, courtesy of Janet, and we're going to be trying to look at what types of people are choosing the maximum versus the joint and survivorship. And if you know something about public employees, there are a lot more women working there, a lot of teachers. About half these people would be teachers. So maybe there's something going on there that we want to look at anymore. So Olivia put this conference together. Nice job, Olivia. And we're looking at the impact of an aging world. And so the question that we were asking in this paper was, are these options that we've just been over optimal or the best options possible for an aging world where people are living longer after they retire, perhaps after they start benefits? And so we wanted to look at this in a couple of different ways and think about, could we argue for some different options? And so what we're looking at is really trying to think about two different kinds of workers. So most people are aware that public employees tend to retire relatively early from their career job. That doesn't mean that they leave the labor force. It doesn't mean that they never work again, but it does mean they're leaving that career job. So let's think about two different types of people. One, healthy individuals who leave their career job because state and local governments have put together pension plans that give them a strong incentive in many cases to leave in their 50s, and so they do. People do respond to economic incentives. These people may be very healthy. They may plan on continuing to work, and if we look at then what are the options available to them, are they the best for that worker? There's another group of people that may be retiring earlier but may not have any idea of working after that, and so we want to think about what are some options that might fit these folks. So for the healthy person, if they plan on working, and if they worked a full career, North Carolina's benefit formula is 1.82% per year of service. So they work 30 years, they've got 55% or 56% of their salary from their defined benefit plan. They're covered by Social Security, but they're not at age yet. And so the thinking is, well, if they're actually going to another job, and if they took full benefit right away, they may actually have a higher income after they leave the public sector than not. And the question is that the best thing for them? Or could they think about something that was mentioned briefly earlier, some sort of deferred annuity, which would allow the individual to say, I want my pension, but I want it to start in 5 years or 10 years. As opposed to right now, your only options across all of these plans that we looked at, South Dakota, Rob's here somewhere. Where are you, Rob? Was telling me that they're thinking about exactly our plan. I don't know they read our paper early, but maybe. So the notion here is give people a choice about when to start their annuity. And of course, since we're not in the business of trying to help these state plans make money, that ought to be present value neutral. And so just some figures, probably easier to see in the paper. All we're doing here is very simple models to say, at 55, let's say you're going to live 20 years. I guess maybe we should have said 30, given our conversation earlier. Looking at a person starting, suppose their benefit plan was to give them $30,000 if they started at age 55. What's the present value of that? We use two different interest rates simply because 7.25 is about what many of these plans assume. Whether they make that or not is a different issue. I don't want to get Janet mad, so I'm not going to argue against that. 3% is what a lot of economists would argue might be a better number, and so we do it both ways. And because you're discounting and you're compounding here, the numbers aren't as much different as you might think. But the person that gets $30,000 if they started at 55 would get $39,000 if they started at 60, and $45,000 looking at the 7.25 there. So you could just think about or 72 if they waited actually 65. So this is the power of compounding. It's a wonderful thing, we know. So certainly for the person that's going to leave their career job and go to work and make something similar to what they were making before, this clearly could be a much better option, and they get that for the rest of their life, and they get Social Security when they get there. So just one that we might think about, and I'll let you ask Janet why we haven't already implemented this later. The other one is this Social Security leveling. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with Social Security leveling. Who? Quick, raise your hand. So this is a plan where a lot of states, we saw a minute ago, 20 states have this plan. It basically tells people you retire at 55. Suppose you wanted to have a constant, more or less nominal benefit for the rest of your life, combining your pension and Social Security. So the notion is you get a bigger benefit from 55 to 62, and then your pension benefit drops as your Social Security kicks in, and you have the same benefit for the rest of your life. So if you believe all these papers that we've been seeing, either from the Social Security Administration or from John Chauvin or lots of other people, we believe, economists now believe, that delaying Social Security increases the present value of your lifetime benefits. And so if that's true, why do we set up a system that basically encourages people to start at 62? And so looking across all the states that have this kind of plan, the notion is that almost all of them specify 62 as the leveling point. There are a couple, I think there's one that has 65, and I think Virginia allows like somewhere between 62 and 65. And so the notion here is, why not give people choice again? And the wonderful world of computers, things are supposed to be fast. You're supposed to be able to calculate these things pretty quickly. And so if you believe that this is a good annuity option, then letting the person specify what age they would like the leveling to start, and you could even go back out to 70. You're trying to get the person the most present value for the benefits that they've earned over their lifetime and letting them choose how they want it. And of course, obviously, the numbers would have to be worked out by the system. You've got all the right data to do it. You've already done it for one age. How much trouble could it be for several ages? And anyway, we could give you a list. In the paper, I think we actually show which states have this option, and you can look there if you want to see if your state is one of these that have that there. So public pension plans provide a number of options for retiring workers. We know that many of these plans have in the neighborhood of 6 or so options, different types of joint and survivorship. But are they sufficient? Are they the best annuities that we could offer people, given that we expect this lifetime trend to keep going up? I'm not sure that it's going to keep going up that straight line forever that we saw at lunchtime, but maybe. And in any case, people should be having a better option by looking at our two annuity options here. Again, all these options should be present value neutral if the system is going to give them. The systems will tell you that their options are basically present value neutral now, and so the question is, how would you put those together to provide these other options? If we went back 20 years, it might be actually difficult to have a lot of choices for all these different ages, but shouldn't be a problem now, and so that's what we were proposing, and thank you.